Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you see the screen? Let's try this. Okay, there we go. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, we'll give it another minute, let folks get signed in. Okay, 12:02. Let's go ahead and start then. And I'm sure people will continue to sign in. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the last community table of 2025. And today we're going to talk about just everyday de-escalation. And this is a training that I've put together and done in several different settings and formats. There I've got like a half-hour version of it, and I've got a 2-hour version of it. So you're going to get kind of the in-between version today. Some of you may have been to one of my other trainings where I did this, so I hope it'll just be a good refresher for you. So let's get started then. I can get the screen to change. There we go. What is de-escalation? That's a word that gets thrown around a lot in the field of social services and homeless services. So, what is de-escalation? Well, it's basically the reduction of the intensity of a conflict or potentially violent situation. So, those uncomfortable situations that we think might go awry or they've already gone awry and we don't want them to get any worse. De-escalation is the reduction of the intensity of that. What is it not? De-escalation is not something you do to another person. And we're going to talk more about that, about trying to impact another person's actions, but it's really not about doing something to another person. It's not exerting control over somebody until they do what you want. There's no coercive element to it, and it's not making threats. One of the most important things to remember about de-escalation is that it really starts with you. So think about any volatile or potentially volatile situation. The first thing you need to do is to de-escalate yourself first. Because the truth is that the only person you really have control over is you. So, if you've had basic biology, or you might have learned this in a psychology class, that these tense situations trigger our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses that are managed by the amygdala. I'm going to try to do this without changing the screen. This little green piece right here, tiny. See how big the brain is, and the amygdala is this tiny little piece right here. And that tiny little piece right there, its only concern is immediate survival. It's not capable of logic and reason, which is why when we are dealing either with ourselves or another person and trying to calm down, if that amygdala has kicked into control, then logic and reason are not going to work. So its only concern is immediate survival. So if you're in a situation that is escalating, it's important to understand that the other person is already there. Their amygdala is already taken over. And so you cannot assist another person whose amygdala has taken over if you haven't gotten control of your own amygdala. So that begs the question, how do I manage my amygdala? So here are 3 steps that you can do to get this amygdala under control. And the more you do this, the more it will become second nature to you. And it's hard to think about these 3 things when you're in the middle of a tense situation. But if you can think about them when you're not in that situation and maybe kind of walk yourself through it after an event, or if you anticipate an event coming up with maybe a client that's particularly challenging, or a situation that you're nervous that you think it might escalate, then think about these ahead of time. What do I feel is the first step, and that is feeling emotionally. And what do I feel physically? What do my emotions feel like, and what does my body feel like? Second step is, what do I think? And this is usually those sentences and phrases and questions that go through our head based on what our emotions and our body are experiencing. And then the third thing is, what do I say or do? And this is where you show control. So let's kind of back up for a minute and talk about our emotions. So I've got my little emotions from the movie up there. Just some very common emotions that people feel when that amygdala is firing. So scared, mad, afraid, all of those things. Um, I want you to think about a minute a situation where you personally were in crisis. It might have been when you were at work, it might have been something that involved your family, your community. Just think about a situation that was a personal crisis for you. And I'm not going to ask anybody to share what their crisis was, but I'm going to tell you my crisis, not the details of it, but I'm going to tell you the things that I felt emotionally during a time when I was in a crisis. And if you felt that same thing or something very similar during your crisis, I want you to hit the raise your hand or hit the thumbs up, okay? So this particular crisis that I experienced some time ago, some of the things, the emotions that I went through, I felt lonely. So, did anybody else feel lonely during their personal crisis? Okay, we've got a raised hand there. All right, another thing, okay, a couple more, a few more, yeah. Okay, another thing that I felt was angry. So, when you all were experiencing your crisis, did anybody feel angry or something similar to that? Okay, got some raised hands there. I was also worried about how this whole thing was going to play out. What did the future hold for me? Okay, so some more hands raised. And I was extremely disappointed. Okay, some more hands raised. Okay, so if we were to share what our specific crises were, they would be all over the place. We would all have very different stories about different situations that happen to us. But you see that the emotions are the things that we share. So that's an area where we might find some common ground with a client who might be experiencing a crisis. But it's important that we recognize that in ourselves, that when we are faced with a tense situation with somebody, that is a crisis for us as well. So it's important to be able to identify our emotions. And so the second part of what we feel, besides our emotions, is, what do I feel physically? Did my heartbeat speed up? When you're in the heat of that moment, does your breath get short? Are you breathing from your chest or your diaphragm? One of the things we do to help people calm down, maybe you've done it yourself, is to do some breathing exercises. And that's to help get our heart rate slowed down and to get that oxygen into our bodies and help our bodies relax a little bit. Muscles, are they clenched? These are the most common places for the muscles to clench is in the face or the jaw, the arms or the fists, or the legs. Because remember, your body is preparing for conflict. So your body is physically going to respond. Raise your hand if you're a jaw clencher or a tooth grinder. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very common when you're experiencing anxiety or a tense situation. So you may not even necessarily be able to control that, but it's helpful if you're just aware of it. So, what we feel physically and emotionally, and then what do I think? And these are those, as I said, words and phrases that go through our head when we are in these situations or we feel a situation is about to erupt. Oh, not this again. Am I about to get hurt? I really don't feel like getting yelled at today. I swear to God, if she doesn't calm down, I'm going to lose it. Should I call the police? I can't deal with this right now. I hope they don't have a weapon. So, those are the kinds of sentences that go through our head. And so, along with that, is kind of a caveat. It's important to understand that if the person you're dealing with is homeless or coming out of homelessness, they are in crisis and experiencing trauma, and their amygdala is in control. And this is what you're competing with. So, every person who's experienced homelessness has at least two traumas. Whatever event led to them not having a home and being without a home. Those two things right there is every client that we see in homeless services. Now, we know that so many of our clients have many, many more traumas than this, many that happened at other points in their lives before they became homeless, and many happened after they experienced homelessness, just being out on the streets, being in the shelters, maybe, excuse me, maybe they've been robbed, beaten, assaulted, sexually harassed. Um, their families have been pulled apart. So we know that homelessness in itself brings more traumas. So some other things that people might be experiencing are mental health issues. We know that schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, PTSD, and major depression, those are the ones that are clinical diagnoses that impact a person's amygdala. And so we want to try to understand what the other person is experiencing. Uh, we've got to think about what major losses have they sustained? Well, stability, family, identity, social standing, their possessions, community, health. And so with every loss, we know the stages of um, grief here. And we know that denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance are normal phases of grief. But I think one thing that people don't realize is that there's a grief process for each loss. And so it's not just, oh, I lost my home, so I'm going to go through these things. It's okay, I lost my physical home. So I'm going to go through these stages by losing my physical home. Well, losing my physical home also means that I lose my identity and my possessions. So I may be at denial over losing my identity, but I could be at anger or bargaining when it comes to my possessions. So not every loss or sub loss is going to have the exact same trajectory in experiencing these phases. And we know that a person doesn't go through them one, two, three, four, five: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Somebody might go through denial, anger, and bargaining and then go back to denial, or go back to anger, or switch back and forth between anger and depression. And as I said, that process happens for every single part of that loss. And so we can see how complicated the grief process is, that it's not just a straight line or even a line that kind of goes up and down. Grief is all over the place. And somebody may come to acceptance in losing their community, but never get over the fact that they've lost their health. You know, maybe they've become disabled and they struggle with that for the rest of their lives. So grief is messy, it is ugly. And it's important that we remember that our clients experience all of this on a regular basis. So as we continue to think about what the other person is experiencing, their mental health issues that they might have, their grief processes, we also see a lot of people who have substance use disorder. So addiction, you know, there's a lot of things that go along with that. If we deal with a client and they're high, that means they're out of touch with reality. They may have hallucinations or delusions, very similar to what somebody with mental health issues is experiencing. If your client is going through withdrawal, then there's nausea, vomiting, headaches, fever, chills, a lot of things that look like um, other physical illnesses, but it's because their body is trying to get used to not having that substance in it. And that is traumatic on the body. And they also may be suffering abuse from a dealer who is coercing the client uh, to pay them, or there may be physical assault or sexual assault involved in drug use. A lot of our clients are trafficked. They have no control over their body, their money, or their life if they're being trafficked for sex or being forced to panhandle. So what do I say or do? That's a lot of things to try to take into consideration. What's going on with me? What's going on with the other person? So what do I say or what do I do? The important thing is that you try to get your prefrontal cortex under control. And unfortunately, there's not a switch on our brain that we can just flip from amygdala to prefrontal cortex. That would solve a lot of problems if we could do that. But that's unfortunately not how our brains work. So, some things to help get our prefrontal cortex under control is: one, know and manage what pushes your buttons. So it's important to identify what type of person causes you to react more intensely, because the type of clients that might push my buttons might not push your buttons, and vice versa. So some of the common types of attitudes or issues that can trip somebody up are clients who act entitled, clients who have substance use disorder, clients experiencing psychosis, clients who are manipulators, clients who are smelly or dirty. So if you know ahead of time that those are the kind of clients that just make you cringe when you have to interact with them, it's good to know that up front and just, own that for yourself. So some exercises that you can do is when you're calm and um, you feel like you're pretty much in control of yourself, role play with somebody else how you want to respond, or act out your responses in your head. You can also write out your ideal scenario. Um, how many times have you had an argument or a disagreement with somebody, and then later on you thought, oh, I wish I had said this, or I wish I had brought up this point, or whatever? That's when your prefrontal cortex is finally starting to speak up and go, hey, yeah, you could have handled that a little differently. But if you do some work ahead of time, you're more likely to uh, be in control of yourself if you're proactive rather than reactive. So maybe think about a coworker, a trusted coworker or a supervisor that you could role play with. And as I said, act out the responses in your head. Give yourself a couple of minutes and think, okay, maybe I didn't do so well with the person this time, but the next time I am going to say this or do this or respond in this way that's much more productive. And write it out, and that'll help you remember. Okay, so what do I say? What do I do? Continued. You can prevent and minimize the likelihood that someone will escalate. And here's some things that you can do for that. Create a positive, non-threatening environment. This is pre-escalation. Just giving somebody your name, asking them what their name is, can go a long way with just people feeling respected, because that's how fights start a lot of times between our clients. Fights among themselves is they don't feel like the other person is respecting them, their space, their belongings, or whatever. So if people just feel respected, then that sets the tone. And asking somebody their name sets the tone as well. You are important enough to me to know your name or what you like to be called, and I will tell you my name, what I like to be called. And greetings, hello, hi, good morning. Those are complete sentences. You don't have to necessarily engage somebody in conversation all the time, but just acknowledging somebody, uh, again, creates an atmosphere of respect. Looking somebody in the eye. Small talk. Oh, are they still cleaning the street out there? Ooh, is the rain making you as sleepy as it does me? Just little comments like that normalize the situation, normalize the environment, and help people feel respected. So give compliments and use positive reinforcement anytime you can. If you've um, followed any of Ryan Dowd's trainings or been to any of his sessions, he talks about you put pennies in a cup. And the compliments and the positive reinforcement are those pennies in a cup that you might have to spend later. So, morning, James. Is that a new hat? It looks good on you. You don't have to compliment on somebody's hat, but if you're trying to create an environment of positivity and build your relationship with that person, compliments, genuine compliments, can go a long way with it. Hey, Donna, I really appreciate you making sure that door closed behind you. It's cold outside. Don't want that cold to get in here. Oh, I really appreciate you having all your paperwork ready today. That'll make things go a lot more smooth. Um, hey, I put out those little candies I know you like. So again, that just sets a tone. These things are really simple, they're easy to do, and it just creates an environment of respect and normalizing your relationship with somebody. Another thing is to be respectful when enforcing rules or setting boundaries. Make statements that do not imply judgment. Hey, Mike, this isn't a place where you can ask folks for money. Oh, Tracy, I'm so sorry. I need to let you know that your clothes have a really strong odor today. I have to ask that you leave until you can take care of that. Um, the first statement, this isn't a place where you can ask folks for money. That sets a limit. It puts a boundary there without making the person feel judged or minimizing who they are. Um, the second one, I know our clients don't always have access to showers and clean laundry, and odor can be a really big issue. And so if you make the problem the clothing and not the person, it can still be uncomfortable, but it's not going to feel quite as judgmental. And maybe you could offer some solutions. Tracy, I'm sorry. I need to let you know that your clothes have a really strong odor today. I have to ask you to leave until you can take care of that. Maybe they don't know where they can get a clean change of clothes or where they can get a shower, and that's something that's information you can provide for them. So again, you're addressing the situation, you have to set the boundary, but you give them resources on how to resolve it in a respectful and non-judgmental way. And then more about what do I say or do. Our physical environment can play a big role here too. Things like the signage and the posters that we put up, we have to communicate information to our clients about what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do when they enter workspaces or in the shelters. And so state things in the positive as often as possible. And that would be like, um, do not leave this door open. That's stated negatively. If you could say, please keep this door shut at all times. Same message, but it's asking people a favor rather than demanding that they do something. No demeaning cartoons, memes, t-shirts, bumper stickers, things like that. Um, there's a lot of memes and cartoons that are work um, are about work-related stress, and our need to vent is valid, but we don't need to put those out where the clients can see them. We don't need them um, to be to have access to our venting and our need to express frustrations. They don't need that. And then cleanliness. I understand that when you work for a nonprofit, you might have several staff bunched up in a small office space. Um, Waiting rooms might be really small, um, or you don't always have control over the space that you work in, but we want to try to keep it clean of clutter, smells, and stains, because again, if your office space or your shelter space is disgusting, that sends a message to the people who come in and use that space that they're not worthy of being in a space that's clean and not offensive. Okay, so I've given you a lot of information so far. Are there comments or questions about any of this? Just go ahead and put that in the chat and give you a minute to type. Okay, well, we'll move on then. Okay, tips and tools. These are the very practical things that you can do, things you can say and things that you can do um, when dealing with somebody that might escalate or is already escalating. One thing that's really helpful is to avoid starting a sentence with you need to and try using an I statement. You need to stop versus I'd like you to stop. You need to stop is controlling. I'd like you to stop is setting a limit, establishing a boundary, but not being controlling about it. And it almost sounds like a favor. And they might be a little more willing to help you if you kind of ask them to do a favor rather than you just making a demand on them. Another thing is that just because someone else is loud doesn't mean you have to be. Matching volume makes a situation worse. And I know that that's a tendency that if somebody yells to yell back at them, but remember, you want your prefrontal cortex to be in control because their amygdala is in control. If they're yelling, it's that amygdala that's yelling because it's just trying to survive. So if you get your prefrontal cortex under control and keep your volume down, you're going to keep a bad situation from becoming worse. This is one of my favorite things to mention too, is never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. I hate it when somebody tells me to calm down, and it actually makes it worse for me. So it's an easy thing to say, now calm down, calm down. But if we're not helping that person calm down, telling them to calm down has no effect whatsoever. Let's see, we got one in the chat. Okay, the verbiage is really helpful. I've learned toward ignoring the signs and odors, but having something to reference. Okay, going back to the odors thing. Yeah. Um that was a big one for me when I first learned how to do that, was to make it the problem of the clothes and not the person. So it's not so personal. Okay. Um so ask questions and clarify. Use those active listening skills. Just ask the person, how is it that I can help you? What is it that you need? Is this what you're asking for? If you listen more than you talk, you're going to help that person de-escalate. And it's not that you never should talk, but sometimes they need to vent. They just need to get it out. So let them get it out and validate what they feel. You know, if that's what was happening to me, I would probably feel the same way that you do. Um, you don't have to agree with what they're saying, but you can validate their feelings. Another thing is that you can move to a more private area if possible, because you don't want to embarrass them in front of others. If it's in the waiting room or in the shelter or in your office, you want to give them as much privacy as possible because audiences escalate conflict. So even if you just go to the other side of the room and lower your voice a little bit, or go around the corner or outside, or if there's another area, if it's safe for you to do so, then you want to have as few spectators as possible. Because I know if I were getting criticism or feedback from somebody, I would not want a bunch of other people watching or being privy to that conversation. So that's another important thing to remember, is that audiences escalate conflict. Give the person some privacy if you need to tell them something that is uncomfortable, or about their behavior, or about their odor, anything like that. Uh, you'd be amazed at how much you can de-escalate just by removing other people from the equation. And then there are times when you need to play the broken record. And that's stating the same thing over and over. Sometimes you need to state it in different ways, but it's the same message. Um, I need you to leave. It's time to leave. Staying here is not an option. So, some more tips and tools. You want to be aware of your own body. We've talked a little bit about this. Your breathing, you want to take slow, deep breaths from your diaphragm because your normal reaction is for your breathing to be shallow and quick from your lungs. But that's the amygdala. You want your prefrontal cortex to help you breathe slowly. That will help you remain in control of yourself. You want to be aware of your body language. How close are you to the person? Think about personal space. You don't want to be too close to a person. You don't want to be too far away from the person. But you want to let them know with your body position that you take them seriously, that you're interested in what they have to say, and that you're going to listen. But your body position is also important. Ryan Dow, that I mentioned a minute ago, he talks about trying to keep your body at a little bit of an angle. So you're not squared up with the person. You're kind of turned. That can do a couple of things. One, if worst case scenario, you did have to take off running, um, you're in a better position to do that. But it also, uh, when you're square on with a person, sometimes that can feel threatening. But if you're just a little bit angled, you can still give the person your undivided attention without it feeling like it's a threatening position. So, hand gestures are another important thing. If your tendency is to clench your fist when you're in a tense situation with somebody, even if you're saying the right things and you're doing the right things, if your fists are clenched, the other person could take that as a threat. Because remember, they're not thinking from a place of logic and reason. Their amygdala is telling them, I just got to survive this. So if be aware, this is a good position. I don't know if you can see my hands. This is a good position. It's helpful if you can keep your hands where people can see them. And I'm really bad about putting my hands in my pockets when I get nervous. And that's really not a good thing because somebody might think that you could have a weapon in there. And we don't want to give them uh, fuel for their fire to escalate. So it may feel unnatural, it may feel uncomfortable, but keep your hands relaxed and open where people can see them. And eye contact is another thing. You want to give just enough eye contact that people know that you're engaged and you're listening. But eye contact that doesn't break is very threatening. It can be intimidating. People who are trying to intimidate you will make eye contact and not break it. So normal eye contact in a normal conversation is you make eye contact for a few seconds and you kind of look away and then you make eye contact again. And if you just notice that in regular settings when people talk to each other when they're relaxed and calm, that's how eye contact goes. You make eye contact, you kind of break it, and then you come back. So you want to do that with the person you're talking to. Again, that dead on stare is intimidating. And if they're doing that to you, it's a way for them to try to intimidate you. So don't try to match that because that is a power struggle and you don't want that. So you also want to think about your tone and your volume. You can say the same thing but different ways and communicate different messages. If I said, I'm sorry to bother you. I need you to move from this chair and come over here to this chair for a minute. It is very different from, hey, get up out of that chair and come sit over here. Basically communicating the same information. This place where you're sitting is not where you should be right now. You should be over here. And your reasons could vary. It could be, oh, you're next in line, so you can move up closer to the door. Or the ceiling's going to fall in, so I don't want you to sit right where the ceiling tiles are going to hit you. Um, Lots of different reasons, but your tone and your volume um, will either be respectful or disrespectful. And giving your reasons for doing something can go a long way. So if you had to ask somebody to move chairs, for example, if you could just say, I'm so sorry, but looks like we've got a leak coming in the ceiling there, and I'm gonna have to move the chair you're in and put a bucket there. Do you mind moving over here? Um, that's just common sense. So your tone and your volume. Um, are you listening or are you talking more? With somebody who is escalated or on the verge of escalating, it's important to listen more than you talk. I had a client many years ago when I was a case manager for 7 counties. I worked out in the rural division. And there was a man who had been in Central State Hospital numerous times for multiple suicide attempts. He was diagnosed with major depression. He had some life trauma and his marriage was breaking up. And so he was very depressed and he kept trying to kill himself. And because his wife was making him leave the house, I was trying to help him find a place to live. So I had him in the car one day and we were going out and making applications at different apartment complexes. And he told me that he thought his wife was trying to poison him. And he gave his reasons why he thought his wife was trying to poison him. That one time um, she made supper and she served him a plate and she didn't eat any of the food. And one time she made the green beans and they tasted a little different than what they normally tasted like. So he thought that she was trying to kill him. And he said, "Do you believe me?" And I said, "Well," and I was shot in the dark. I got lucky here. I said, "I don't know if she's trying to kill you or not. But I do know if I thought that somebody I loved was trying to hurt me, I would be heartbroken and terrified." And that opened a door. And he started to talk more about things that were even more delusional and paranoid. And I just listened. I said very, very little. And so when we finished looking at apartments, I made another appointment with him, but I went straight back to the therapist who had been seeing him for months and told her what he had shared with me. And she said, "Get him in here. I need to do some more assessment on him." So we got him in there. She assessed him for psychosis. And so this man who had been in Central State Hospital numerous times and had actually been in therapy for quite a while never felt comfortable enough to tell somebody exactly what was going on with him. And he finally got diagnosed with schizophrenia and got him on medications for schizophrenia. And his mood improved and his paranoia uh, decreased. So the point of that is I just listened to him. I became a person who was safe for him to talk to. I acknowledged his feelings. I didn't try to argue with him or try to convince him that he was delusional and his wife was not trying to kill him. Um, Listened, took him seriously, validated his feelings, and he opened up even more. And this was a man who would break down in tears every time I saw him. He would just cry and cry and cry. And when I finally just let him talk, then his depression didn't go away, but it improved. So that's an example of why listening can be more effective, even if you don't solve the person's problem. Just acknowledging what they feel and what they think can go a long way. Okay, some other things that you can do, just tips and tools. Break the momentum. Offer a cup of water, coffee, a granola bar, a piece of candy. Um, at one of the jobs where I was a few years ago, there was a client who came into the office screaming at the top of her lungs, and she was also suicidal. And we couldn't get her to stop screaming. And so we got her into a room that nobody else is using, and we could still hear her throughout the building, but it wasn't quite as loud when we got her into another room. And so one of the therapists came in to sit with her and to see if she could help de-escalate her. And she just kept screaming. And so again, I just kind of took a chance and I walked by there and I said, I'm going to make a pot of coffee. Would either one of you like a cup of coffee? And the client stopped screaming and she said, I would like a cup of coffee. And I asked her what she took in it. I didn't acknowledge the screaming or anything. But it was a cold day and I thought, it's cold. I want a cup of coffee, so she might want one too. I brought her the coffee and she settled down, and I don't think there was anything magic in the coffee or anything like that, but just kind of breaking the momentum. She had started screaming, she couldn't stop. And when I just asked her something normal, like, would you like a hot cup of coffee? That kind of broke her momentum a little bit. And another thing about offering somebody a cup of water, uh, people can't cry if they're drinking a cup of water. So just little things like that can help people kind of break that momentum. It kind of interrupts that energy. You can also go smoke, take a walk. I'm not a smoker, but I've walked outside with clients before and, you know, um, let them smoke. Um, I've never seen any data on this. I don't know if there are any statistics on it or not. I mean, I know that nicotine can have kind of a calming effect on people, but I think sometimes that inhaling and the blowing out of a cigarette is helpful to people. We want people to breathe in deep and breathe out. So maybe there's something about that smoking other than the nicotine, that breathing in and breathing out. And I don't advocate taking up smoking, but it's kind of a harm reduction thing, that if that's what helps the person calm down, then why wouldn't we want them to do that? Take a walk around the building, walk up the street and come back. Those kinds of things can help break momentum. And I keep saying this, acknowledge what the other person is feeling. I can tell this really upsets you, even if you think they're being totally ridiculous. Or unreasonable. I can tell that you're really, really upset about this. Or, maybe they're right. If I were in your shoes, I would probably be mad too. Or, oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying. Or what an awful burden to carry. Those are some phrases that you can use to help people feel like that you're acknowledging what they feel. Another tip and tool is just be okay with giving a minute, because it will save time in the long run. We are all busy. Our attention is pulled in 40 different directions at one time. But if you're on your way to a meeting or an appointment, and a client is on the verge of escalating, or they've already escalated and they just want to talk to you, go ahead and give them a minute, or say, put that boundary there and say, well, I have another obligation, but I will give you 3 minutes. Tell me what you need to tell me in 3 minutes, and then let them talk. Acknowledge what they're feeling, and then say, well, I've got to get to my appointment. But I will call you when I'm done, or I will have your therapist call you, or whatever. But you just kind of let them vent and blow off steam a little bit. And because if you give them that moment, that will keep them from escalating and it becoming a big thing or a bigger thing for you to deal with or somebody else to deal with. Another thing is to know your limits. If it turns into an argument, if it feels like a power struggle, or you feel like you're not making progress with that person, go and get help, remove yourself for a bit, or simply end the interaction. It is fine to set boundaries with people, to take care of yourself, maybe to take care of other people. So here are some things that you can say to set those limits, and acknowledge that maybe you're not the person to help. Let me see if I can find someone who can help you better than I can. You're still being helpful, but you're setting a limit. Let me go check on something for a minute that might help me better help you. And you don't actually have to check on something. You just might have to go alert a coworker or go de-escalate yourself. There are plenty of times when I've told a client, give me just a minute, I need to go to the bathroom, or I'm going to go refill my coffee. Do you want some before I come out here and talk to you? And then I kind of shore myself up, take some deep breaths myself, and maybe alert somebody else, that I got this situation that could potentially go awry. So could you kind of be on standby here? I need some time to resolve this for you. Can you come back tomorrow morning? Again, that acknowledges what they're asking for, but it gives you a little bit of a break, might give them a little bit of a break. Sometimes people need to go away and calm themselves down. And if you just say, I can't take care of this right now, but I can do this tomorrow, you state your can't and your can. And that communicates to the other person that whatever their need is valuable, it's valid, and that you can help them when you can give them the proper attention. But then there are also those situations where it's just gone round and round and round and round, and nobody is making any progress, and you just have to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to discuss this anymore, and it's time for you to leave. But that statements, I won't discuss this anymore. It's time for you to leave. And another thing that's important is to try and not start a statement with you need. You need to leave, as opposed to it's time for you to leave, or I need you to leave. And it might be, I'm sorry, the office is closing and I have to lock the doors and turn out the lights. We will be here tomorrow if you want to come back at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever time you open. But using that you need to, that comes across as judgmental and controlling. So try to get that phrase out of your vocabulary, even if it's something helpful, like, oh, well, if you want this service or that service, you just need to go down to such and such place. If you get it out of your vocabulary in those situations, you're less likely to use it in negative situations. So you can say, oh, Well, St. John's Center can help with that rather than you need to go to St. John's Center because, again, that can come across as controlling or bossy. Some other things you can do use your sense of humor. Sometimes self deprecation can diffuse the other person. Ooh, I get it. There are days I feel like life is a circus and I'm all the clowns. Just making people laugh a little bit can help take the tension out of a situation. But you want to be careful of coming across as sarcastic or ridiculing. It's important to be direct, concrete, and simple. And this is especially helpful for people who are distracted by voices or people who have learning differences. Write things down in simple terms and steps. And people learn and absorb information differently. Um, I'm more visual. I had a case manager one time that I supervised who was more auditory in the way she retained information. So I could write things down for her and it didn't mean anything. But I could tell her and she would remember everything. And that just blew my mind because I am not an auditory learner. I like to write things down. I like for you to write things down for me and give that to me. But if you've got a client who has some type of learning issue or they have voices or they have substance use disorder, sometimes writing things down in simple terms and steps helps them. And it could be very simple, like call this number, ask for this person, tell them I need. So, there's 3 steps of things that they can do. But you want to make it simple. You don't want to throw in a lot of information, just the basics of what they need to do. Because a client can get angry real quick if they feel overwhelmed with throwing a lot of information at them. And the easier and more simply you can put things, the less likely somebody is to feel overwhelmed. And as I mentioned, state your can'ts and your cans. I can't meet with you right now, but I can see you tomorrow at 10 and I will give you my undivided attention. I can't give you a ride to a shelter, but I can help you call someone to see if they'll come get you. So you're setting a boundary, but you're still offering assistance. And they may say, oh, no, don't worry about it. I'll be okay. I'll figure it out. Okay, no problem. But if you just stop it, no, I can't give you a ride to the shelter. That doesn't help the person. That can come across as uncaring. And this might be a situation where you have to give somebody a minute in order to prevent a lot of minutes from being taken up later on. I can't give you a ride to the shelter, but you can use the phone in here to call somebody. So giving them some options helps them feel empowered and helps them feel like you care about their problem, even if it's a problem you can't solve. So, as said before, practice role play with a coworker or use that time in supervision to role play. Write out scenarios of how you want to respond. If there's somebody that, oh my gosh, every time I talk to this person, it turns into an argument. Well, write out your ideal scenario and the things that you want to say to that person instead of what you actually say or do. Or just mentally rehearse it in your head. The phrases that you want to use, go over them in your head so that when you are in front of that person, then you're more likely to rely on those more productive tools than the unproductive ones. And then you want to take time to calm yourself after an encounter. Even if it went perfectly, you could still be pretty tense and worked up, even if you did all the things right. So you want to be able to take some time to calm yourself. Go take a walk. Um, Debrief with a coworker or supervisor on what worked or what didn't work. Oh, I'm so proud. I mentally rehearsed how I wanted to talk to this person, and I did it, and things went much better this time. Or, oh yeah, I tried something and it didn't work. Or all my tips and tools, I just forgot about everything. And I have to tell you also, I can sit here and give you all these wonderful tips and tools. Um, but I'm much better at doing these things with clients than I am with my own family members. And, this is my confession right here. My mother has dementia and she lived with us for 2 years. And then a few months ago, we put her in a nursing home. And it's like when I talk to her, all of these things, it's like, it never existed. Um, I forget everything that I ever learned. So I have to really make an effort to do these things with my own family member. Give me a client with psychosis any day. Uh, and I am perfectly comfortable and fine. But when my mother calls me and accuses me of having abandoned her at the nursing home, oh man, it just flies out the window. So, give yourself some permission to not be perfect with this because we want progress, not perfection. Um, so let me see. I got a couple of comments down here. Let's see. All right, Destiny says, I found that saying that can also be judgmental and embarrassing. If I had known, I would have went there first before coming to you. I would suggest saying St. John's offers a housing group on Thursdays at 11. Yeah. And I loved when I was in EMTB and my patients were worked up and they were screaming and yelling, but telling me they can't breathe. It was entertaining to see them breathing quite well, just telling me that. Airway breathing and circulation were working. I got them to the hospital and let the doctor calm them down. Sometimes they have to get those chemical calm downs. Um, thank you, Destiny. Okay. All right. So this is something that comes up frequently is should I call the police? And frequent police calls can have negative consequences. So the police showing up can scare or trigger other people. Too many police calls can result in delayed response time. And when officers arrive, they may minimize what's happening. So if you're calling the police a lot because you don't know what else to do, um, that these are the things that can happen. So you want to be very careful about calling the police. So use the police only if you've used the tools and tips and the situation is not de-escalating. Only say you'll call the police if you plan to follow through. Don't use that as a threat, and then never do it. You have to be prepared to follow through with that. And according to Ryan Dowd, the 2 times you should call the police, the situation is dangerous because there are actual threats. There's the presence of a weapon. There's violent or damaging actions to persons or property. They pick up a chair and throw it across the waiting room. Okay, call the police. If they show you a knife or a gun, call the police. If they say, I'm going to be waiting in the parking lot for you when you go to your car at the end of the day, that's a threat. Call the police. Extremely bizarre behavior outside of societal norms like urination or defecation or nudity. Those are definitely situations where you want to call the police. The person refuses to cooperate after reasonable attempts have been made. So you have work to do before you get to that point of calling the police. You want to use them as the last resort. Okay, questions. Okay, that's Destiny again. Same comments. Okay. All right. That is the end of the information. We've got a little bit of time left. Does anybody have questions or comments? I'll give you a couple of minutes to type things in. We got about 20 minutes before we officially have to end. Any chance of getting a certificate of attendance for this webinar? Yes, I can give certificates to anybody who needs that. That's not a problem. Just let me know. Other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming today. I hope this has been helpful information for you. And if you have questions later on, let's see. Okay. Yes, and I can send out the slides. That's not a problem either. I'll just send it to everybody. Oh, hey, Dortha. Um, I'll just send out a certificate and a copy of the slides to everybody that was in attendance today, so that you won't need to notify me separately. I'll just go ahead and do that. So thank you for being here today. You will get the opportunity to do a survey. And okay, I really like the reminder that we need to stay calm in order to help the client. Okay, good feedback. So please complete your survey, and that will help us know what's been helpful for you, what we need to do differently in the future. And hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, and hope you have a wonderful holiday season coming up. And reach out to me later on if something comes up and you have a question about a situation. I'm here for you. If you want me to come out to your agency, I can also do that and reach more staff that way. So thank you for your time today. Have a good afternoon, everybody.